Hello world. Vaccine. Hello. Okay, hopefully we escaped the echo from the centuries. So, everybody here in Rethino and the rest of the world, wherever you are, hello, I think we're ready to begin, hopefully, right? All right. So, we'd like to welcome you all in this year's installment of ScapeCon, the International Postgraduate and Early Career Conference for the Aegean Bronze Age. This is the fourth consecutive event of what started as an initiative from postgraduate students of the University of Heidelberg back in 2018, continued by the Adam Mickiewicz University of Poznan in 2019, and despite all obstacles, by Groningen University in 2020. The spirit of ScapeCon is to provide postgraduate students, PhD candidates, and early career scholars the opportunity to present and discuss their work and research to an audience of peers and help them get accustomed to the usually daunting and stressful process of academic conferences and article publications. The success of the initiative has already inspired 3 continuations and a forthcoming one, as will be announced officially in the coming days. Thus, ScapeCon is slowly becoming an institution and a community for young scholars that engage in the study of Aegean prehistory. The theoretical context of the conference is relational archaeology, which would take it to denote a wide scope and open-minded approach on the archaeological record understanding. A constant reminder that our object of study is not just the material remains and artifacts discovered by the archaeological dig, but rather the understanding of a nexus of animate and inanimate components, a once living world out of which there is no escape. Yet, there can be, as there always has been, change. And sometimes this change can be radical. And this is where the theme of our conference stands. Taken from the 200 years from the Greek Revolution, a period that shape-shifted modern Greek history, setting the foundations of the current Greek state, and taking place in a time of global scale rearrangements, ScapeCon 2021 is in search of radical scapes in the Aegean Bronze Age. We are here to discuss revolutions, not necessarily as events, but rather as processes that breed a new world or a new view of the old world. The Bronze Age, a time of great socioeconomic, technological, and cultural and environmental transformations, is perhaps the perfect stage to discuss and contemplate about a radical turn of events in the past, present, and future. Change, however, does not stop in the theme of this year's conference. It practically runs through it. In the years of the global pandemic, ScapeCon had to adapt in order to continue. Last year's event was completely online, and this year we are having it in hybrid form. This might come with unexpected or perhaps expected complications, hopefully not that many, but also has provided the opportunity to have here colleagues that otherwise would be unlikely to be, and also urge the ScapeCon community to set more firm formats for online potentials. Moreover, and more importantly perhaps, ScapeCon 21 will introduce for the first time a roundtable discussion, a feature that gives the opportunity to everyone involved to sit together, even if virtually, and discuss freely about the relational archaeology of man, thing, and nature, and the future of ScapeCon. We hope that this will strengthen the institution and our sense of community in an overall manner, and gives us the chance to create something even bigger and more creative in a collective way. We can't tell yet if this can be dubbed a revolution or rather the evolution of an inspiring initiative, but it's surely up to all of us to contribute into creating an academic scape that can help young scholars in numerous ways. Before we salute you, we would like to thank Artemis Karnava, Nena Galanidou, and Katerina Kopaka our teachers, instructors, and presently the scientific committee of ScapeCon 2021. And finally, to make a mention to Nikolaos Faraklas and Thanasis Kalpaxis, two great teachers of our Department of History and Archaeology who passed away this year. They might not be here with us, but us being here bears their imprint in many ways. So we would like to welcome you all once again in ScapeCon 21, No Escape Revolutions, and wish you all a creative and intriguing conference. The floor now goes to Antonis Karnava. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I don't know, can you hear me? Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm very happy to see the few of you who are here, the lucky few who made it. To tell you the truth, I didn't really believe until the very last minute that this was going to be a live event. So I'm very happy I was proven wrong, because I'm very happy to actually see people around instead of being locked at home in front of a computer screen. So I would like to welcome the university and my I wish you the best of success with your conference. I will be here watching every day because it's my task to do a summary of your papers and sort of help in the discussion in the end. I'm in the fortunate position of not presenting a paper, so I'm very relaxed and I will be listening very, very attentively. ScapeCon is I think it's a great opportunity. I'm very curious to see what the future of Aegean prehistory looks like. And if all goes well, you are going to be the future of Aegean prehistory. It's my wish, and I wish you the best for the future. So I would like in my turn to thank the university for being able, even at a short notice, to fund this meeting, which is very helpful for us. And in the next days, I hope to be able to see more people in person, people who are in Crete and will hopefully make it to our gathering. Thank you very much and welcome again.
Thank you very much, Professor Karnava. Thank you very much, Adonis. I would also like to welcome you. It's 6:20, so maybe we can take these 10 minutes to prepare for the presentations of the session 1, in case someone hasn't logged in yet. Guys, what do you think? Yes? So we will turn the screen off the Zoom broadcasting, prepare the presentations, and give you the image back again. So I think we're all ready to begin with the first session of the ScapeCon 2021. The first session's title is Shaping a Revolution, Social Organization and Change. We are going to have 3 presentations. Can we share the screen here? This one. Όχι, έκανε παρουσίαση. Κλείσε αυτό. Και κάνε. We have some difficulties because we are still adapting to this new, both online and live conference. We hopefully will get used to the procedures. So our first presenter for the day is going to be Daniele Vendramin. He comes from the Université Catholique de Louvain. Secondly, Antonis Vratsalis-Pantelaios will speak about his research. And then we have Giorgos Apostolakis. He's the 2 latest presenters are from the University of Crete. So we would like to invite Daniele up to the podium. He will speak to us about a contested landscape addressing social organization in the Prepalatial Asterousia in Crete, the Lebena tombs as a case study.
this and this, and you can open your presentation. Let me. Okay, so your presentation is this. Okay. You can, when you want to start, you can share your.
Okay. Shall I go? Okay. What a second, that's not me. Yeah. About the presentation itself. Yeah, but sorry, so,
Like this? Okay, and you can, no, sorry. You have to share your screen on. Screen. This one. Okay. Share the 5.
yeah. Okay. Okay. Prepalatial Crete has always been a poorly understood era of dominant civilization. Reasons include a tendency to study this period as a prelude to the emergence of the old palaces, looting activities causing loss of artifacts and damages to stratigraphy, an overrepresentation of burials caused by few excavated settlements, and a continuous manipulation of bone and artifacts typical of Prepalatial funerary activities. All these circumstances have considerably hindered advances in our knowledge on Prepalatial social organization. There is great consensus, however, that Prepalatial Crete was a kinship-based society composed of a dispersive settlement pattern, and where the social life gravitated around a set of relationships regulated by actual or fictive blood ties. However, beyond this point, the discussion becomes very generalized and usually limited to the analysis of wealth accumulation and social hierarchization. In recent years, however, new important evidence have been published. The funerary record, especially for South Central Crete, have been, for instance, enriched by new publication of circular tombs and their assemblages, while other cemeteries have been reanalyzed, revealing better evidence for the existence of social groups and log-awaited analysis. At least for one cemetery are now available. Given the overall improvement of the situation in the archaeological record, this presentation aims to provide a better understanding of the Prepalatial social organization. Its characterization of the kinship-based society will, in particular, be approached through a new methodology proposed in recent ethnoarchaeological research. For this purpose, the circular tombs of Lebena and South Central Crete will be addressed as a case study, since they present one of the best excavated and least looted tombs, and they benefited from recent and true publication. I will first discuss general information concerning the tombs, including their spatial disposition, archaeological history, chronological framework, and relationship with other tombs of the region. Then we treat the material evidence with a focus on the distribution patterns of material culture that can inform us on potential group relationships both at the local and the regional level.
This discussion will involve architectural features, pottery, and precious artifacts such as seals, daggers, marble figurines, and stone vases. Confronting this evidence with available anthropological analysis might provide a potential model for the kinship-based social structure that regulated social life in the communities of the Lebena region. Lendas is a modern village on the southern shores of South Central Crete, near the Roman harbor of Lebena. It is located in the southernmost part of the Mesara, a geographical region encompassing not only the Mesara Plain, but also the Asterousia Massif on the south and the Aegean foothills on the north. Emergency excavation in the area along Lendas led in the 1950s to the discovery of 5 circular tombs in 3 different locations that may represent separate cemeteries. The first is on the Papura Hill just west of Lendas and consists of 2 conjoined circular tombs, Lebena 1 and 1B. The second was found in the modern hamlet of Gavdos, 4 kilometers west of Lendas. It also consists in 2 conjoined circular tombs, Lebena 2 and 2A, and Lebena 2 also has a 4-room annex. The last cemetery is situated by the locality east of Lendas, Gavdos, and consists of only 1 tomb, Lebena 3. Like all circular tombs, also called toli, the Lebena tombs are communal burial monuments built on large blocks of local limestone, with the sole exception of Lebena 2A, which was built with smaller blocks. Lebena 2 Gavdos was built in EM1 and was part of the very first circular tombs erected mostly on small patches of arable land in the Asterousia. The other Lebena tombs were added during EM2A, when double circular tomb cemeteries became common in South Central Crete. The annexes to Lebena 2 were added in EM2B, also when an intense fire episode is attested inside the burial chamber of Lebena 2A. All the Lebena tombs were abandoned during MM1A, except for Lebena 3, which was used until MM1B. Lebena 1, 2, and 3 have a similar internal diameter of circa 2.5 meters, while the conjoined tombs of Lebena 1B and 2A are much smaller. This may have been intentional, since the only other known example of conjoined circular tombs, the unfinished tombs of Agia Kyriaki B and C in the Aggio Valley, also present a tomb much smaller than the other. Each of the Lebena tombs have a 3-tron entrance, but with different orientation. While Lebena 2 and 3 face east, like most other circular tombs, Lebena 1 faces the southeast in alignment with the midwinter sunrise, while Lebena 1B faces south and is not aligned with any obvious celestial event. Lastly, the entrance to Lebena 2A was destroyed, but might have faced south similarly to Lebena 1B. Lucy Goodison suggested the tomb not aligned with major sunrise events, including the Apura tombs, were perhaps influenced by Cycladic burial customs. The Lebena tombs suffer from an extreme scattering of bones of great goods, typical of circular tombs, as they were swept aside every time a new interment occurred. Grave goods included pottery and stone tools, but also jewelry, such as beads and diamonds, and pieces of specialized craftsmanship, such as seals, daggers, figurines, and stone vases. Some artifacts were, however, probably not proper grave goods, but part of post-funerary depositions. All tombs present a comparable number of grave goods, with the noticeable exception of the much wealthier Lebena 2 Gavdos. This is, however, not necessarily evidence for wealth inequality, as the number of interments that occur in each tombs remain unknown. Moreover, despite its apparent wealth, Lebena 2 lacks some valuable artifacts such as gold items found in both Lebena 1 and 3. Therefore, Lebena 2 may have just had a custom of bestowing several pots of grave goods. Evidence for different burial customs among the Lebena tombs is also suggested by a thin layer of bones and a small number of grave goods in Lebena 1B, which could either constitute evidence for few burials or intense bone removal and manipulation activities. Most important, some specific elements of the funerary assemblage likely bore more social significance than others. Pottery may have been used as a means of social competition to a display of elaborate styles and ostentation of contents. These were probably symbols of social identity. Dagger shapes arguably determined the group identity, and other artifacts such as marble figurines and stone vases had a clear prestige value in Prepalatial society, as they were usually found in the wealthiest tomb alone. For this reason, these artifacts have been used in studies of Prepalatial structure, including regional identification of different social groups in the circular tombs. This will also be the line of approach I follow in this presentation. Pottery in the Lebena tomb mostly comprise the most common shapes and styles for the period, with the sole exception of the rare EM1-2 white on red Lebena ware, which is, however, attested in all 5 tombs. Such a standardization is not surprising, as this was likely a consequence of American pottery craft specialization. Lebena pottery nevertheless provide good evidence for exchange and trade activities, illustrated by AM1 pottery imports from the Cyclades and Western Anatolia to Lebena 2 Hierocambos. Later EM2, both Lebena 2 and Lebena 3 show contacts with north-central Crete, Lebena 1b with eastern Crete. Most important, there are some strong connection with other circular tombs in the Mesara, represented by a set of pottery craftables that the same potter or workshop that ties Lebena 1 and Lebena 2 respectively to Kumasa and Monigditria. Pottery can also constitute evidence for ritual activities. In particular, this EM2B pottery, the fine EM2B pottery in the Hierocambos tombs, was found in room N of Lebena 2, but inside the chamber tomb of Lebena 2A. From late in EM1, seals are attested in Lebena. They are made of lacquer softstone, animal bone, boar tusk, and hippopotamus ivory, and were all found inside the burial chambers, aside from a late Prepalatial seal from room AN. Lebena seals present a distinct choice of seal material for each tomb, which might be relevant since shape and engravings are always connected to given materials. Lebena 1 Papura clearly preferred bone and ivory seals through its entire use life, including 12 2MA ring seals with their bezels made of bone and believed to be made by local artisans. Lebena 1B can be expected by a tomb showing maximum interference, only yielded 2 seals, both in softstone. Lebena 2 Hierocambos also prefer softstone seals, at least during the EM1 2A period, while late Prepalatial evidence is restricted to a bone and a serpentine seal. Lebena 2A is another tomb with a marked M2 preference from bone seals. But again, in the late Prepalatial period, preference become blurred and it preserved 2 ivory and 3 softstone seals. Lastly, Lebena 3 Zervo also preferred softstone seals during M2, but again, the late Prepalatial period follows the practices of the other tombs. It might be then concluded that while in EM2, the Lebena tombs had a clear preference for specific seal materials, this was no longer the case in the late Prepalatial period, when moreover several Lebena seals appear to use a same spiral and group motif. It might be also noticed that available evidence of the other circular tombs of the Mesara suggests a similar pattern, with several tombs showing a preference for specific seal materials. Prepalatial copper and bronze daggers are usually either short triangular or long daggers. Triangular daggers were mostly found in the Mesara tombs and presumably belong to a local crafting tradition. Long daggers are linked to Cyclades metalworking tradition and widely attested through Crete. Both types are attested in Lebena, all belonging to AM2. A triangular dagger was found both in Lebena 1 Papura and Lebena 2 Hierocambos, while long daggers are only found in Lebena 2 Hierocambos, 2 dated to AM2A and the other 2 to AM2B. Although there are also 2 additional daggers of unclear type, the overall picture appears somehow similar to the seal distribution pattern, especially Lebena 1 Papura and Lebena 2A Hierocambos share a similar preference for seals and daggers. Once again, such a trend appears reflected on a regional scale, with most circular tombs presenting a preference for one of the 2 typologies. Marble figurines, rare artifacts perhaps used for specific ritual funerary activities, are attested in Lebena since EM1, which use schematic figurines found in Lebena 2. During M2, the most common type is, however, the Comasa type folder and figurine, typical of South Central Crete. A figurine of the Kumasa type was found each in Lebena 1b Papura, Lebena 2 Eurocambos, and in Lebena 3 Zervo. While a Docatismata type figurine possibly imported from the Cyclades come from Lebena 1b. Lebena 1 Papura and Lebena 2 Eurocambos, however, did not yield any figurine. Such a distribution of figurines correlates well with the evidence from other present artifacts. Our figurines were found in the same tombs that have also yielded softstone seals from EM2. Similar material choices are also illustrated by other circular tombs in the Mesara. At Platanos, for example, only tomb beta has figurines, and at Kumasa, only tomb epsilon is without figurines, while at Siva, only tomb F has figurines. Stone vases are precious vessels, usually made in local softstone and believed to be a product of local Asterousia craftsmen of the area, as the area would have easily provide materials. They first appear in EM2A, and they are in a style similar to contemporary clad vessels. Stone vases present a wide range of shapes, which hampers an appreciable reconstruction of stylistic distribution pattern. And why it is evident that the stone vases from Lebena 1 Papura are the only ones exclusively associable with East Cretan shapes, perhaps through the meditation of major Mesara sites such as Platanos and Kumasa. All the other tombs present multi-shapes common to other Mesara tombs, and the Lebena 1b Papura even has an AM2A stone vase most likely made by the same artisan or workshop, also responsible for a group of contemporary vessels in Lebena 2 Eurocambos. This time, Lebena 1 and Lebena 2A do not appear to share the same tastes, but it is possible because the stone vases from Lebena 1 are of EM2 date, while those from Lebena 2 are dated to the late Prepalatial period. On the other hand, the other tombs maintain the same appearance of shared material culture with a preference for local vases. Parallel evidence, therefore, does not only support the existence of multiple social groups, each which the other circular tombs, as has been suggested for other Prepalatial cemeteries, but also clearly depicts a wider network which apparently was made up by two main groupings, and this especially during the EM2 period. One group includes Lebena 1b Papura, Lebena 2 Eurocambos, and Lebena 3 Zervo, which share a preference for softstone steel, Kumasa type figurine, stone vases probably produced in the Mesara, and perhaps also long daggers. The other group includes Lebena 1 Papura and Lebena 2 Eurocambos, which show a common taste for bone and ivory seals, triangular daggers, and possibly also for stone vases of East Cretan manufacture. What is, however, most surprising in that same is that the same dualistic trend can be observed in other circular tomb cemeteries in the region, and that this opposition is most evident within the tombs that make up a single cemetery. Since there are virtually never more than two circular tombs in the same cemetery, this observation seems even more surprising. The reticence from building more than two circular tombs within a same cemetery has been explained away because they served a clan burials and therefore bounded to a kinship group with the use of different burial structures at additional repositories. However, no convincing theory has ever been offered to explain why almost all Mesara cemetery had to contain no more than two circular tombs. If we consider the evidence for South Central Crete, we can observe that Prepalatial cemetery with two circular tombs constitute about half of all cemetery since at least EM2A, with a sample dating back to the late EM1. Much like the conjoined tomb of Lebena, the double circular tomb cemetery seldom present a tomb that are of the same side. Especially in border areas such as the foothills and seashores, the tomb often present different entrance orientation to the extent that 6 out of 9 circular tombs presenting regular orientation are part of a double circular tomb cemetery. Such a repeated system of duality and opposition cemetery presenting two tombs of different sides with different entrance orientation, different type of dagger, seals, marble figurines, and stone vases strongly suggest the Prepalatial society in South Central Crete were probably not only composed by rival groups, but also shows an inherent form of structural dualism that also permeated the aspect of material culture. And it is interesting to observe that in anthropology and kinship studies, there is quite some literature on this particular social phenomenon, that of dual relationships. Anthropological analysis are common means for archaeologists to understand biosocial structure, at least since the advent of new archaeologists in the 1960s. Future studies are, however, seldom distinguished as they are perceived as mostly archaeologically invisible. This negative attitude has been challenged in recent years, with new research blaming previous failures on an excessive focus on very changeable aspects of material culture. Now the focus has shifted in more durable evidence of kinship activities, including the evolution of settlement distribution pattern and the existence of diachronic pottery exchange networks among communities. Funerary evidence, such as cemetery distribution and grave analysis, it is also widely believed to reflect kinship relationship among the deceased. There are therefore good reasons to infer the existence of a well-attested aspect of some form of kinship structure, such as dual relationship, from the rich funeral documentary evidence, and as that which has emerged from the analysis of the Lebena tombs. In anthropological literature, the relationship are also called moieties, for moitié, French for halves. These consist in dividing the social group into halves for reasons of coexistence and collaboration. Two organizations attesting very different societies, ranging from egalitarian revolutionary group to North American tribes, are their social purpose does not necessarily involve social stratification, but resolution of conflicts. Each group that makes up a moiety defines itself through a number of natural and cosmological dichotomies. For instance, male and female, young and old, north and south, summer and winter, and so on. These divisions are used to provide an ideological construct to enforce social convention addressing potentially conflicting issues, including the choice of leaders, order of precedence in ceremonies, and labor division. The Tawa Pueblo from the US Southwest, for example, has summer and winter moieties whose leaders alternated each other as village chief from season to season. Moieties can also influence plural practices. For instance, the Tlingit of Southern Alaska are a ranked dualistic society, which also practice communal burials. Both the funeral and the secondary burial are carried out by affinal relatives, which are also members of the opposite moiety, as they are felt and immune to pollution from decomposition. The secondary burial, which also coincides with the deposition of the remains inside the collective tomb, is part of a highly competitive ceremony called potluck, during which the commemoration of the deceased is a pretext to challenge and reestablish spiritual division and hierarchical relationship between people, clans, and moieties. Moieties are not a straightforward aspect of kinship. Although they are sometimes believed to have a role in marriage practice, only some societies effectively behave this way, while most use moieties are meant to enforce dualism in ceremonies and social activities. Moieties are also often depicted as typical of matrilineal societies, although there are several cases of patrilineal societies presenting some form of dual organization. This perception probably originates from an abundance of moiety organization among matrilineal Native American societies of the West Coast. But an automatic association between presence of dual structure and matrilinearity should not be taken for granted. Despite all the uncertainties, moieties remain a typical aspect of social organization kished by society, and they constitute a way for two non-kinship groups to passively coexist in the same territory. It is probably most easily defined as a form of fictive kinship. The evidence from the Lebena tombs and other cemeteries discussed in this paper seem consistent with the dual organization model. For instance, two circular tombs of different dimensions in the same cemetery can be explained as a senior-junior division, while different orientation might reflect seasonal or geographical division. A different funerary rituals attesting some Mesaria tombs, including Lebena, can be displayed as moiety-exclusive rituals. Interestingly, skeletal analysis from Onyx-Ditria by Servant and Triantafilo illustrated two distinct groups that showed a different labor specialization. It is a typical feature of several dual societies. Lastly, preference for prestige artifact could have constituted a means for moiety identification, which could also include the features in perishable materials, such as textile decoration, in particular herdiers. Prepalatial Crete is usually regarded as reflecting a highly competitive society. We would have easily needed some form of social elaboration through some moieties to carry internal rivalries. Other kinship aspects of dual relationship are, however, less evident in our present evidence. For instance, there is no posting evidence for marginal alliance, nor for a matrilineal organization in the Lebena tombs. Crete Giannis assumed to represent both sexes occur in all tombs, and beads with beads in the walls and other objects typically associated with female fashion activities being present. In modern-day archaeological kinship, settlement patterns are said to be especially instructive, and moieties in particular tend to physically divide the settlement in church halves. Unfortunately, Prepalatial Crete still seriously lacks excavated settlements, and known is for the moment associated with the circular tomb cemetery. This is extremely frustrating, especially since field surveys regularly notice a presence on unexcavated settlements, often not far from circular tombs. Lebena is no exception, with at least 3 sites noticed near the Papura Zervo tombs. One in particular, found in the Aegean Papura area near Papura, appears to be a relatively large settlement inhabited and left in EMM1A. In conclusion, the evidence supporting the system of moieties in circular tombs of the south-central region in Prepalatial Crete is extremely promising, but this hypothesis still remains at preliminary stage. Further research is necessary to clarify how such a hypothesized dual organization would have operated in data in Prepalatial Mesara. Excavation of settlements near circular tombs is essential, while DNA analysis of human bones will greatly help in reconstructing major networks and therefore potentially clarifying whether the moieties also behave as Marius hyphens. Thank you for your attention.
We would like to thank Daniele for this interesting presentation on kinship grounded on the Lebena tubes in Mesara. I would like to ask you to make all your questions at the end in the session of discussion, so as to be prepared for the next presentation. I would like to ask for 10 minutes from your time, so as to be less than 10 minutes to be prepared for the next presentation with Antonis Vratsalis. You can have a walk or anything else till we're prepared. And we're sorry for all this, but it's for the first day and we have a lot of problems, but I think we will overcome them as we go through. I think we are back. I hope we are back. And we should move on with the presentation of Antonis Vratsalis-Pantelaios and Giannis Paschos on metallurgy from the island of Gavdos. Antonis, if you are ready.
Hello, for the first time. Now I hope you can hear me. Keep on overcoming technical difficulties. Just a sec. I think we're getting there. Yup. Okay, full screen. Got it.
Is it okay? Yeah.
Oh, got it. So, hello once again. This is a joint presentation. I'm speaking on behalf of both me and my colleague Giannis Paschos, who's currently in China, so he won't be able to join us for this. But hope this goes well. So, in the late 14th century BC, just off the eastern shores of Uluburun in Asia Minor, the journey of a sailing vessel comes to her fatal end. For the next 3,300 years approximately, The wreck of the ship and her contents remained in the deep until it was discovered in 1982 by Mehmet Shakir, a Turkish sponge diver, who then reported it in local authorities. Soon afterwards, an 11-year underwater excavation began, and since then, the Lubrun shipwreck stands out not only for being the earliest Bronze Age shipwreck yet discovered, but mostly for capturing the essence of the late Bronze Age international era, a time of intense exchange of a large variety of commodities, characterized also by the systematic trade of metals. Among other retrieved commodities, the 10 tons of copper and 1 ton of tin, enough to produce 11 tons of true bronze, sufficient to arm a whole army, aptly testify for the explicit discourse about metals, documented in a large number of Eastern Mediterranean region sources. This appears to go along with central copper producing areas intensively exploited during the second millennium BC. The above strongly suggest that metals held an essential part in the late Bronze Age economy, and that the arrangement of procurement, exchange, and distribution networks was within the interests and concerns of the centralized administrations of the time. However, this was only the culmination of a process that had already begun about 4,000 years before, already by the 6th millennium BC. Metallurgy is being practiced since the Neolithic times, and its production and consumption process has undergone significant alterations throughout this millennia. Here, we wish to discuss the rearrangement of the metallurgical scapes during the 3rd and 2nd millennium BC in relation to socioeconomic processes that resulted in a radically different human environment by the late Bronze Age. Metallurgy is the craft that starts with the extraction of metal from ores and results in creating metal objects and artifacts. A vast array of minerals have been exploited for metallurgical purposes, and some of the most known, valued, and exchanged metals already since the Neolithic times are gold, silver, and copper. While from the end of the 2nd millennium BC, iron also begins to be extensively used as well. From these, copper is often attributed a special significance for the overall context of the Bronze Age. Of course, it is only one of the resources and products that were extensively consumed during this time. However, it appears to occupy a vital part in the arrangement of the economic system as a whole. It is used in everyday and prestige items, weapons and authoritarian symbols alike, but it is also traded in standardized form as ingots and serves as a means to store wealth as in hoards. It is discussed in royal correspondence, it is used as a compensation for craftsmen, and is an essential resource in the overall production of the communities as it is used in a large number of other crafts. Thus, copper is practically used for everywhere, yet it is not everywhere to be found. Copper is included in mineral ores that occur both in underground primary deposits and on surface outcrops, secondary deposits, such as malachite, cuprite, azurite, chalcopyrite, and others. However, it is only a few areas in the Mediterranean that have considerable such deposits, and even fewer that are considered to have been exploited or even exploitable. In this context, the possible copper resources and the provenance and exchange networks are an extensively discussed matter in prehistoric studies, considering the Aegean as well as the rest of the Old World. From the 5th and 4th millennium BC, metalliferous regions where smelting sites have been located are the Balkans, the Taurus and Zagros mountains, the Caucasus, then the Araba Valley, and later the southern Iberia, the British Isles, the Alps, and the Slovakian Ore Mountains, while during the 3rd and 2nd millennium BC, the Cyprus and Sardinian copper deposits are also extensively exploited as well. In the Aegean region, direct evidence suggests the practicing of metallurgy since the late Neolithic. In Crete, even though it is one of the main metallurgical areas of the Aegean during the 3rd and 2nd millennium BC, the evidence for locally practiced metallurgical activities during the late Neolithic and final Neolithic remain limited, while it is largely considered that the island has no substantial exploitable sources of copper. The few sites with copper deposits that have been suggested until now are deemed to be non-exploitable. For the late 3rd and 2nd millennium BC, Lead isotope analysis suggests that the vast majority of copper used in Crete came from the mines of Lavrion and only later, during the 14th and 13th century BC, from Cyprus. These were mainly from underground sulfidic or primary deposits, where the quantity and purity of the mineral is usually higher. However, it is well agreed that a large part of copper used during the Early Bronze Age was from oxidized surface ores, often mixed with sulfidic ores, coming from the Cyclades and Lavrion. The exact mining sites and sources of copper used until the Early Bronze Age remain elusive. However, surface deposits and smelting sites have been identified in a number of Aegean islands like Kythnos, Serifos, Kea, and Sifnos. Often they are found in rather small outcrops scattered around the islands, so we should imagine a kind of harvesting process for the procurement of the ores, rather than a central site for their extraction. The mineral that appears to be more commonly used for the extraction of copper in these cases is malachite, a deeply green stone, popular in jewel crafting as well due to its impressive glassy texture and vivid green color when polished. Malachite is found in metamorphic rock, is relatively easy to identify when someone is accustomed to it, and is considerably rich in copper. Thus, we can rather safely state that up until the early 2nd millennium BC, copper metallurgy in the Aegean largely came from surface exploitation of little green stones. In Gavdos, the small island about 25 miles off the southern coast of Crete, considered as the southernmost margin of Europe, one of the first things that the visitor will see as he approaches from the north are the shining cliffs of Gavdos, the promontory where the emblematic final Neolithic site of the island is located. Here, they don't seem so shiny, though it's not just a picture, but it's this part here I'm trying to find. And the view from the west. The whole range from this site into the east until the modern port of Karaves is a surface outcrop of metamorphic rock rich in copper minerals such as malachite and cuprite, giving a shimmering, lustrous, vivid green and sometimes purple-red view to the northern cliffy shores of Gavdos. Starting from older hints and hypotheses for copper exploitation, the Gavdos Archaeometallurgical Project systematically investigates the possibility for metallurgical exploitation and production in this small island in the Libyan Sea. The project is an interdisciplinary collaboration between the Departments of History and Archaeology and Material Science of the University of Crete, led by Professors Katerina Kopaka and Pavlos Savidis, and part of the research done concerns the chemical analysis of the mineral ores of Gavdos. For this purpose, the two speakers, along with fellow participants Eleni Chryazomenu, Vivi Vlachou, and Roxanne Medzikov, carried the field research in order to gather representative samples for chemical analysis with the contribution of geology Emeritus Professor Apostolis Alexopoulos. The results that will be published and announced in the forthcoming inclusive presentation of the project suggest that copper-rich ores are commonly found across the surface outcrops of metamorphic rock through the Gavdos range. We consider them in the early Bronze Age context. The Gavdos-Karaves deposits are within the perfect condition for tentative exploitation. They are surface deposits strikingly visible at first sight by the route to approach the island and literally at the sea. Moreover, they were within the immediate vicinity of one of the earliest sites of the island. Therefore, the communities of Gavdos must have already noticed their presence, perhaps even since the final Neolithic. We already know that Gavdos was in direct or indirect way part of the metal networks during the late Bronze Age, as suggested by the numerous metal finds and most indicatively from the hoard found at the site of Katalimata. However, the occurrence of such deposits makes us wonder if the local ores were exploited either by locals or from outsiders, even if just to a minor extent. The pottery shared with a layer of copper, possibly fragment of a crucible or some other thick clay vessel, found during a survey in the neighboring islet of Gavdopoula, would suggest that smelting of copper was also taking place in the small island complex. This is going too fast. These issues will be adequately addressed by Gavdos metallurgical project. Here, however, we will consider Gavdos simply as one more of the islands that could tentatively provide copper resources and proceed to discuss the transforming state of metallurgy from a likely decentralized mode of production during the early Bronze Age into a seemingly standardized and centrally arranged mode during the late Bronze Age, in relevance to the transforming state of the Aegean communities during the same period. The Bronze Age metallurgy networks are an extensively discussed matter. Concerning the second millennium BC, it is largely agreed that these networks operated within the sphere of centralized administrations. Metallurgical workshops were closely related to Minoan court-centered buildings or palaces, like in Kartemou in Malya and the unexplored mansion in Knossos, and in other major sites like Enkomi in Cyprus. However, in the early Bronze Age, the occurring image does not seem to suggest the same. Studies on the smelting and possible mining areas in the Aegean Islands do not confirm a close association with specific settlements. The same seems to be the case with the large smelting workshop of Chrysokamino in East Crete, specialized only in extracting copper from surface ores brought from Lavrion in the Cyclades to Crete, and not involved in the production of metal objects. Intriguingly enough, the main operation of this workshop was during the early Minoan II and ceased by the early Minoan III period, only a little before the beginning of the so-called palatial period in Crete. While it operated, Chrysokamino strongly indicates technically divided production chain in metallurgy, arranged over long-established networks. So just a second, technical difficulties once again. So perhaps it could be argued that Chrysokamino, or likely the early Bronze II and III periods, are a threshold to a new approach on the metallurgical and socioeconomic process alike. Up until the mid-3rd millennium BC, metallurgy was practiced in a rather limited scale in Crete and the Aegean, presenting, however, a remarkable and distinct localized character. Moreover, the copper used often presents varied traces of other minerals, such as arsenic and nickel, likely suggesting different points of origin. It is at this time when we should imagine the use of the deposits of malachite and other copper-rich ores to be exploited in a number of islands, such as Kythnos, Serifos, Kea, Sifnos, and tentatively Gavdos as well, and then reach Crete. This would seem to favor a more independent production chain, both for the procurement and for the crafting of metals. However, this metallurgical scape begins to present a whole other picture by early Bronze Age too, Brannigan's metallurgical explosion. The use of copper-based artifacts is dramatically increased, and the copper used seems to come mostly from richer, purer, yet a lot more demanding to extract underground sulfidic ores. The mines of Lavrion explicitly testify for the sophisticated and specialized mining process undertaken for the extraction of the underground deposits, while the overflowing of Eastern Mediterranean with copper from Cyprus during the late Bronze Age suggests that mass production was also demanded, and that copper was traded in largely standardized way, the ingots, as pure metal and not in ores. Moreover, the fact that from the Middle Bronze Age, the copper and tin alloy, that is true bronze, becomes predominant, adds significant complexity in the metallurgical process, as tin reached the Aegean through extensive exchange networks originating from Afghanistan, Britain, Iberia, and the Caucasus region. The combination of these features deem it rather improbable that the metallurgical process could continue in such scale under an overly decentralized manner. Therefore, between the early and the late Bronze Age, we have arguably two radically different arrangements of metallurgical production in a time when the socioeconomic organization of the island communities become increasingly centralized. Metallurgy has long been considered as a driving force in the socioeconomic rearrangements of the Middle and Late Bronze Age, and the idea about a revolutionary quantum leap by the end of the early Bronze Age is an old and heavily debated concept. However, it is not the scope of this announcement to engage with this debate, but rather to note that the shifts in extraction, procurement, processing, and distribution of copper between the final Neolithic and Early Bronze Age and the Middle and Late Bronze Age seem to go along with a radically different mode of socioeconomic organization. The question of this was simply the evolution of a millennia-old process or a revolution rising from new strategies applied by the communities is perhaps too difficult to answer by itself, but the wider context is more suggestive. The upgraded role that metallurgy presents in the economy as a whole, becoming one of the main means for wealth and prestige, and a major subject for discussion, documentation, and trade, takes place in a time when the socioeconomic process in the Aegean become increasingly centralized and the palatial sites show an emphatically central character in the organization of the island communities. Within this context, it has long been debated whether control over the metallurgical process was used or abused by elite groups in the formation of more centralized political and economic forms of organization. This suggestion might seem plausible, but does it suffice to explain the overall process? If we think about it, there is no reason to assume that metals were not treated in the first place as a resource like all the others, taken from where it was more conveniently found and put in the best possible use, especially in a time when the metallurgical requirements for the communities remained in a limited level. Any given deposit might well be exploited and put to use for whatever quantity of copper it might give. This would result in a distinct localized production context, a picture that complements the general decentralized mode of socioeconomic organization attested in the greater part of the early Bronze Age in the Aegean. However, the state of metallurgy after the early Minoan and early Bronze too suggests strategic shifts into an increasingly complex, specialized, and articulated production process that drastically affects the potential for an independently organized production. These shifts must have had a catalytic effect on the overall economy, as they take place in a time when the consumption of metals increases dramatically. It is interesting to note, however, that the metallurgical techniques that prevailed during this period are well known for almost half a millennium, while also the techniques previously used are not abandoned, just not the ones mainly preferred. Accordingly, we could argue that it was not simply the evolution of a production process which likely developed for centuries, but rather the decision to establish a new arrangement that eventually revolutionized the metallurgical process in Aegean and in Crete. The result of this decision likely contributed to the establishment of a more paramedical socioeconomic structure, but nevertheless, the radical outcome could hardly have been possible without the overall espousal of this process by the communities. In Gavdos, it appears that no underground copper mine complex was ever operated. Perhaps the ores were not suitable for this kind of extraction. However, those little green stones were likely exploitable to some extent, and rumor has it that they were so up until the early 20th century AD. Nevertheless, in Gavdos, the residents of the site of Catalimata were safekeeping imported oxide ingots during the late Bronze Age. This suggests a decision that goes beyond any easy functionalistic explanation and can hardly be considered an overly imposed one. Thus, to conclude, we would suggest that the rearrangement in the metallurgical scapes during the 3rd and 2nd millennium BC in the Aegean reflect not only the technical developments in the field exploited by an imposing elite, but rather a revolutionary approach on socioeconomic organization urging towards more interwoven and centralized forms. Now this goes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonis,
You're welcome.
for this breakthrough and latest information on the indications of metallurgy from the southernmost islands of Gavdos. How much time do we have? So as to go on with the last but not least presentation of George Apostolakis. Okay. in 5 minutes. We will be back with a presentation of George Apostolakis from University of Crete on revolution out of destruction, the case of Crete and Keos in the Middle Bronze Age. We will move on to the presentation of George Apostolakis, an MA student from University of Crete, on the revolution out of destruction, the case of Crete and Keos in the Middle Bronze Age. George, if you're ready.
Okay. Okay, hello to all. Crete and Keos from Middle Minoan I to the end of Middle Minoan II. With the appearance of the first palaces during the Middle Minoan IB period, begins a long period of cultural fermentation, known as palatial, which develops in successive phases of prosperity and crisis until the final destruction of the Palace of Knossos around 1375 BC. The period of Middle Minoan IB to Middle Minoan II, known as Prepalatial, reflect a wider prosperity and mobility that Crete experienced at that time, with an extended creative development and local interaction in various sections of life, leading gradually the transition of early Minoan societies to urban culture. The appearance of the so-called palaces and the new settlements, along with the existing ones, indicate, in addition to prosperity, a demographic increase. Knossos and Maya, the largest palatial cities, expand significantly on an organized urban network. Art, although it seems to have been initially influenced by Egypt, mainly metallurgy, gradually reaches its technological perfection, creating exquisite objects of prestige. The emergence of the first skilled artisans, combined with the growing social stratification, align with the advanced techniques and the development of complex social palatial practices. The first peak and urban sanctuaries appear while the seized graves gain popularity for its mass burials. Palatial contacts are expanding, providing imports from mainland Greece through the Western Cyclades and Egypt, and several exports of fine Kamari-style pottery destined to Egypt and Levant. Cyprus, Kastri, Akrotiri, Milos, Keos, Dodekanis, and coastal Caria seem to have been intermediate stations of intensive intercultural relations between Crete, Phoenicia, and the Middle East. In the same time, Middle Minoan IB and Middle Minoan IIB, Keos is going through a period of similarly big cultural changes. After a long break of about 200 years, the rebuilding of Aegean Irene, focused in the north side of a small headland, fortified with bastions in its north and protected harbor, illustrates a new important factor that increasingly affects the life of Aegean, the extraction and circulation of the rich ores of Lavrion. Excuse me a little bit. Archaeological evidence Aegean Irene from the very beginning of phase 4 is experiencing a boom in trade and perhaps a demographic increase. The burial evidence reflects that prosperity, while the strengthening of the earlier walls and the constructions of the new great walls at the beginning of phase 5, that is Middle Minoan 2B to 3, reveal similar fortification techniques that followed other nodal and active islands too. The constant and sufficient protection of Keos, the obvious Minoan and Cycladic influences, the widespread presence of Minoan pottery like in other Cycladic islands, as well as the numerous Minoan cells, show a growth of dynamic activity and intensive relations with the rest of Cyclades and Crete, with possible focus on metals. It seems that Keos in this period were collaborating with other Cycladic islands, forming a trade bridgehead into mainland Greece and Crete, the so-called Western String, while together with Syros belonged to a northern cultural unity with close interactions both with Lefkandi I in Evia and in northeast Aegean. The wide use of potter's marks, which verify the existence of specialized artisans, could extend the known hypothesis of local schools of workshops, justifying the existence of an organized management center with a productive surplus to maintain a local production and distribution. This system could have been imported directly from the Palatial Crete by artisans that could have been either locals, some of whom may have been apprentices in Cretan workshops, as suggested by the seal stones found dated in early Middle Minoan III, or maybe mobile Cretans, as has been assumed from Laconia findings of the end of the Middle Helladic period. The technological imports of the vast pottery wheel and the tubular drill from Crete centrally improved the local production and the intra-Cycladic trade. Silver, lead, and copper imports from Lavrion or Laconia were processed and distributed in Cyclades and Crete, showing the important role as well as the degree of contribution of Agia Irini to the general development of Cyclades. The catastrophes in Crete and Keos at the end of Middle Minoan II. A plethora of archaeological evidence shows that a series of extensive catastrophes between the end of Middle Minoan II and the beginning of Middle Minoan III BC changed dramatically the continuity of life. The violent catastrophes, as often been characterized, which are repeated and followed by fire, destroyed the main Palatian cities, smaller urban centers like Monastiraki, and settlements like Archanes. Most of the Middle Minoan II material vanished, along with information about the nature and the operation of the old palaces, while what was remained is what those fires burned, providing, however, the largest stock of the old palatial records. The extremely limited data, together with the illegible interpretation of the pottery and the small chronological differences from eastern to central Crete, make difficult to date and identify the causes as well as the nature of the catastrophes. Only 3 cases provide sufficient evidence to detect anthropogenic causes, but without certainty. The defensive preparations from Pyrgos, a hiding place of the warehouse of the district M in Maya, and the observations of Levi concerning the layer of the last destruction of Festos at the end of Middle Minoan II, which is followed by a fire from an uncertain cause. Nevertheless, it is certain that these catastrophes were the cause both of the end of the old palaces and the turning point in the emergence of the new ones. In Keos, similar catastrophes occurred during the Middle Minoan II-B-3 period, after an uninterrupted evolution in Agia Irini from phase 4 to 5. They were so visible that most of the remains of phase 5 survived as a layer of destruction, distinguished from the phase 6 by the important late Minoan I pottery, and so effective that a precise image of the settlement's life before or during the disaster is difficult to be restored. Large parts of the Great Walls, especially in the east, destroyed shortly after the construction, while other parts were so badly damaged that they had to be rebuilt. Most of the houses were destroyed, and sometimes the rubble used for the foundations and floors for the new houses, phase 6, while some were built with the remains of the damaged walls. Furthermore, in room 12, with phase 5 pottery, similar in style to a rubble deposit in room 15, is related to the work done during the building of the walls, which shows the short period between their erection and destruction during the Middle Minoan 2B to 3 period. This big destruction in phase 5, as well as the one occurred in Philakopy 2-3 phase, led Trail and others to argue that the catastrophes at the end of the Middle Minoan II may have not only be the reason of a break in the cultural development of the island, but even more, the upcoming end of the Middle Cycladic period in the whole Clades. However, since the evidence for the majority of Cycladic settlements is still limited and indistinguishable, both hypotheses and dates for the occurred catastrophes remain uncertain. Yet, the disturbed deposits of Middle Minoan III period, in the case of Keos, might date more securely the catastrophes at the end of Middle Minoan IIB or shortly after. Middle Minoan III Crete and Keos in the new era. After the extensive catastrophes at the end of the Middle Minoan II, the transition to Middle Minoan III introduces a new period known as Neopalatial, highlighted by the emergence of the new palaces. The so-called New Era brought a series of profound breakthroughs, transformations, and revolutionary changes, not only in life, but also in the macro-scale impacts with striking reflections in the archaeological record. Significant changes are taking place in palatial cities, while major alterations and reconstruction programs begin around the later Middle Minoan III period. In Knossos, the old palace is rebuilt. In Festos, is reconstructed twice after a Middle Minoan III earthquake. And in Maya, the remaining part of the old palace is rebuilt with a new northern facade. The regular use of ashlar masonry, the symmetrical layout of urban planning, the impressive houses of craftsmen or administrators, the appearance of inland villas in Nachladia, Gypsades, Kousses, Agia Varvara, and others, and the increasing use of palatial architectural elements like polythyron systems, pillar, skylights, reflect aspects of radical changes in life and social stratification. The known peak sanctuaries and shrines of this period, such as Pesofas and Anemospia, the best architectural examples of Middle Minoan III, and the wealth of votive offerings, combined with the first appearing chamber tombs in Knossos and the abandonment of the more circular tombs and their ancient ossuaries in Messara, indicate new cultural and social changes. A new form of writing, linear A, replaces gradually the Cretan hieroglyphics, while the Cretan seal engraving finds its peak with changes and shapes. Artistic flourishing, a renewal in microsculpture, provides new shapes and themes with the use of the horizontal drill. New forms and changes appear in pottery and vase painting, while the Kamare style is gradually abandoned and the iconography turns to naturalistic style. Provincial differences in art between Eastern and Central Crete disappear, with increasing distinction between palatial and common art with social implications. In the field of foreign interactions, the palatial Crete increases its presence in the Aegean Sea by developing a lively trade and establishing, or related to, installations in Kythera, Kassos, Kos, Rhodes, Iassos, and Miletus. The interaction with neighboring cultural spheres as Egypt and Middle East intensified, like the alabaster cup with the name of Pharaoh of Hyksos Kian, found in Knossos, which inspire art and worship, as shows the stone ritual axe in the form of a leopard from Maya. In the same period, Keos passes into a similar phase of radical reformation. After the catastrophes, a new large urban building program in Agia Irini in phases 6 and 7 takes place. The erection of new buildings, along with the strengthening and expansion of the Great Walls, reveal new social and technological changes, while similar building programs are held throughout the Aegean. House A, a complex large building of 400 square meters with 12 rooms built with a composition of Minoan and local architectural elements, expands as an important place of the settlement. This house, like others similar in Aegean Sea, are assumed to be part of a well-known architectural plan according to which the Cretan palaces were built and then spread to the rest of Aegean, where local and Cretan building styles used. Near to House A, a building known as the Temple indicates significant changes in worship. The findings include more than 50 clay statues of female figures, which, although they seem to be of a Minoan inspiration, nevertheless they differ in their style, with no equivalent example in Crete, giving more especially in costume similar figures from frescoes of Thera. Whether is appearing a new form of a Minoanized or not sort of belief, its importance lies in the fact that the Temple of Agia Irini is the only distinct building of worship outside Crete in Middle Minoan III period. In the same period also, the increased Minoan influence in all aspects of everyday life becomes more profound, implying a possible Cretan installation or settlers. The linear A findings in phase 5 layers, middle Minoan 3A, the spread of technologies such as the Minoan type of loom and the Minoan metric system, which is confirmed by the large number of weights in Keos, Milos, and Tyra, along with the intentional use of Minoan cooking equipment, are arguable indicators of that influence. Davis notices that if the phase 5 have been ignored between 6 and 7 phases, we would be struck by how much more thoroughly Minoan Agia Irini was in the latter than in the former period. Still, whether Keos is Minoanized or not, the obvious increased interactions with mainland Greece, mainly in late Minoan 1B to late Cyclades 2, while redistributed textiles, pottery, agricultural goods, and metals sailed to Crete and Cyclades, saw the dynamic role of the island. Conclusions. Realizing both the extent and the power of the catastrophes at the end of Middle Minoan II, compared with the radical transformations which occurred simultaneously and quite similarly to both islands in Middle Minoan III, the sequence seems paradoxical. Normally, in most catastrophes with common characteristics and the same grade of destruction, there is a declination in all aspects of life, reminding the later decisive catastrophes of early Minoan 1B around 1450 BC, brought not only long-lasting crucial impacts in life throughout Crete, but also the slow end of the so-called Minoan palatial civilization. Even though MacDonald and Appet have pointed out that a much repeated scenario of the destructions is no either tenable or helpful, nevertheless, perfunctory handling of this short, violent period lurks in the background of any research seeking the deeper causes of the emergence of the new palaces and the way of how this new era in Aegean could have affected the world of that time. In the present case, a more careful study in the determinant contrasted features of the catastrophes in junction with the before and after periods within the relationships between Crete and Keos and the individual role in their own wider trade networks came across a remarkable spectrum of insights with considerable observations and notable questions for research. It seems that the relations between Keos and Crete were strong in a quite different way, with traditional bonds originated long before which the catastrophes for unknown causes activated and strengthened. Confronting the case of an underlying Minoan invasion, Davis raises two very important questions. Thus, he wonders why the conquerors destroyed the great walls of Keos if their aim was to exploit the island, and if they left, why they let it rebuild before they abandoned it. Furthermore, he noticed that the latter would reject a case of a sudden pirate raid. In the same way, these traditional bonds in marks explain why Keos, instead of desolation or declination, experienced, like Crete, demographic growth and increased social activity. It is also important to notice a series of main similarities of reformation in various fields, such as urban planning, building programs, architecture, technology, writing, customs, art, and worship. In addition, similarly in analogies, both islands seem to be established in their surrounding sea routes and trading networks as active powers, protecting sufficiently their production, which is controlled by a new, extended, well-fortified, and organized managed center. This could explain also the problematic issue of how did the trade keep flowing during the crucial period of the catastrophes and why trading exchange increased rather than decreased in the next period of late Minoan 1A. Finally, coming to a conclusion, it seems that Keos and Crete experienced indeed a radical revolution out of destruction in the new era revealing a deeper form of intercultural relationship. A more intensive and focused study of the catastrophes and their contexts, combined with the other vivid cultural agencies evolving and reacting across the Aegean and the Mediterranean, could make a precious basin of new questions, giving significant insights and dynamic extensions of perspectives. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, George, for your presentation. I would like to ask all those that participate virtually in this conference to send all the questions they have in the chat so as to be passed to the speakers and discussed in the discussion that follows shortly thereafter. And I would like to ask George, Antonis, and Danielle to come on the stage so as to discuss any questions.
Or any questions? Yes. So, you can sit here. There is a camera and a microphone for the online participants to hear what you're saying. And if there are any questions from online participants, we will pass them on. Do we have any questions for the participants? So Giannis Hatzikonstantinou has a question. First of all, he says, congratulations to all the presenters. He would like to ask the first presenter, that is Daniele, talking about prepalatial thallus tombs. He proposes dual dichotomies based on some ethnological parallels. Can we support this through the manipulation of the deceased? Because the bone assemblages from the thallus tombs, despite their poor preservation, do not agree with this separation.
I didn't understand.
Could you? I can read it again.
Could you please make it possible to be visible?
Yes. You can also read it here.
Okay. Talk about the dichotomy do not agree with separation. First of all, we have to consider that in my proposal, each circular tomb corresponds to a moiety. So the manipulation of the deceased in each tomb is moiety exclusive. In my presentation, I also noticed that each circular tomb has different manipulation activities that may lead to each moiety having different funerary practices. As I pointed out by making the example of the Tinglet of Tarasca, the other moiety may have been involved, but for instance, as grave taker, basically as people who manipulated the bones of the other moieties as being felt as immune to the pollution from the composition. But each moiety, clearly, also in my presentation, has its own tradition. Most probably, since also the groupings are not totally exclusive. For instance, in Lebena, I found that the two groups, one group has triangular daggers, bone seals, and no figurines, but we can, for instance, find, if my memory serves correctly, that in Agia Triada we have a triangular dagger and figurines. So I think that moiety division were much locating and could be re-elaborated from community to community. And of course, some were possibly related to Cyclades aspect. As I pointed out, moiety may form through a collaboration of residential communities and immigrants. But it could be a cultural thing, that is that we are talking about a reality that spans centuries. So people that might have been perceived as Cycladic might have been Cycladic ancestors, but were minor by that point. So there was certainly much re-elaboration also in my presentation. But honestly, I cannot find how bone manipulation evidence could necessarily work against a moiety theory, in my opinion.
Okay, any other questions from the in-person audience to the speakers and the presenters?
Yes,
Yes, sure.
of course.
I'm not familiar with the concept of Gavdos at all, but the concept of kinship organization finds me quite yes, sorry. Well, repeating the question, I'm not familiar with the moieties concept at all. However, the kinship organization concept finds me quite in agreement. And what I find really interesting is that you referred that we have coupled tombs, all right? And each tomb group has three fathers.
It's the main reason, because I think there are moieties, because if we are talking about independent groups, I would have found most likely one kind of assemblage in each cemetery. So one cemetery have their preference, another cemetery having another kind of preference, and it could have been simply represented a community underlining their unicity. But here in Lebena, in both cases, we found basically two conjoined tombs that are physically attached and basically a cemetery frequented by the two groups, and these groups went to great extent to show how different they were. A group had a larger tomb and another had a smaller one. A group had a tomb with an eastwards entrance and another with a southeast or southwards entrance. In a tomb there were triangular daggers and another long, and so on. We are basically showing over and over again two tombs, two circular tombs in the same cemetery, so allegedly in the same community or in the same territory, with two and only two. This is a part of the point, because we almost never have three circular tombs in a cemetery and never four or more. Only two, or at max one. And so there is this absurd duality. Moreover, another circumstantial evidence, and I mean, I could not have time to develop it, but if we see the regional map coming from the seals in particular, we can find that both the few evidence of seals coming from Festos and from Hagios Onofrios, early excavation led by Arthur in 1895, that it was basically a cemetery repository. It's not clear where it came from, but it has been suggested that it was from a local tomb, that is, it was from local. And both Festos and Hagios Onofrios had prepalatial softstone seals. Hagia Triada, just 4 kilometers west, and usually considered the circular tomb Festos, has bone seals. Basically, we are finding two cemeteries usually perceived as belonging to the same communities, the huge community Festos, showing opposite choices.
May I finish my question? The question is, do we see this pattern of two tombs repeating in other regions besides Lebena?
As it has been also pointed out, the material evidence is sometimes poor, and it is at the moment only circumstantial. But as you pointed out, I mean, preference change. As I said, practice objects can be, choice of practice objects can be different from community. So I could not at this moment find an exact parallel for, I mean, what I found in Lebena 2 or in another tomb. This could be.
Not about the prestige items. Sorry, not about the prestige items. I mean, architecturally, they have two tombs, a pair of tombs on a certain site. We have 2 or 3 in Lebena.
Yeah.
Do we see this elsewhere?
Yeah. Yes. As I told you, there is a continuous pattern. It is possible to see my slides. There is a pattern in a continuous pattern in the Mesara. Because I cannot say for the moment that the same thing happened in other tombs outside the Mesara or in non-circular tombs. Also because house tombs are much smaller, and it is possible that were at a family level and not at a larger level. But there is a circumstantial evidence. First of all, yep. Yeah. Yes, but of course only a fraction gave us enough material evidence.
Which page would you like to?
You want to tell where to stop?
Yeah.
Which page do you like to be showed?
Would you like to?
The other with the material evidence, the seals and other. First of all, the seals. The seals are the most common. They were relatively common in confrontation to other.
Do you want to go over there and show us?
Want to go there and find the
Yes.
slide?
I don't this is second.
Thanks. Let's first of all, let's see that. So first the seals might be too little, but we can find here a preference. Again, of course, the Lebena tombs are often the most clear when it comes to seals, but also because we have to keep in mind that the several tombs have been not only looked at but also manipulated. So for the seals, for instance, in Kumasa, in one of the two tombs where there are published seals, one clearly has only bone and ivory seals, while the other are mostly soft seals. 40 we have is almost half. Platanos is most only bone seals aside a piece of stone. But again, Festus Aegian has a tendency. Moreover, the most important thing for Festus Aegian, we are talking about just a couple of seals. So is because I say that is preliminary evidence, but Agia Triada simply has no soft state. In fact, there is a greater preference for bone seals, but several tombs are only bone seals. This, of course, I admit, is partial, but see again what happened to daggers. And there are several tombs with only long daggers, and some, again, Kumasa that has a very divided evidence. That is, tombs with only triangular daggers and tombs with only long daggers. And basically, there is I could say a tendency to separation, but as I told you, is at the moment difficult to the point is, from a point of view, the evidence from Lebena is crystal clear, most probably because we have two conjoined tombs. So we are talking about a community sharing the same cemetery. While in other cases, the tombs are separated, where there are divisions against here with the figurines. The evidence from figurines is more compelling because figurines there are or there aren't, and often is a 50-50 thing. We can see here is a Platanos, Kumasa again, Shiva, Monikaditra, and so on. Vases are more difficult, but again, the evidence from Lebena, which is not only one tomb, but two cemeteries with showing opposite choices, with a third cemetery of Zervo, again mimicking the so-called blue group here, are, I'd say, crystal clear. Other evidence is less clear, but also because there are problems with the excavating evidence. The main reason that Lebena is so often studied is because it's one of which gave the best evidence. So, so part of the problem may be that in other tombs the evidence is limiting, causing by looting, manipulation, and other things. But there is, I should stress, a tendency to separation. Moreover, I cannot even say that in all tombs there was one tomb for belonging to a moiety and one tomb for another. It is possible, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if there was the case, that some community shared the same circular tombs, but basically had opposite material. The reason why in the end I stress so much that we need the settlement evidence is that moiety and dual relationship are clearer when it comes to settlements and not to tombs when evidence can have several reasons. A very partial confirmation of this comes from the only extensively excavated settlement, published settlement from the Prepalatial period, that of Myrtos Forum Corife, is a hamlet in southeast Crete, more or less, when evidence is again a bit problematic because it is not a tomb, it's not an accumulation, but again, seals that are the most common and most used again are only soft stone still in Myrtos Forum Corife. Myrtos Forum Corife is a small hamlet. Several publications have suggested that there were probably a local hamlet where a kinship-based society, probably cousins, live more or less together. But again, we have a community, a small community, with a very I could say, coherent, very unique material evidence.
Daniel, but we have still some questions for you, so and not so much time, so we should go on or move on a little bit quicker. Yannis Hadjikostadinu has another question for you. Where did the plan with the divided settlement come from, Daniel? And then comment on this question. Okay, maybe.
Oh.
Yes, no, I was thinking what to say. Well, in the well, I would say, for instance, I noticed, especially for pottery, Lebena had surely contacts, most probably with Kumasa, but also with the Aegean Valley and especially Moniditria. Of course, evidence is partial since we are talking about much looted tombs, especially Moniditria. But I won't deny that every cemetery, every community is unique for itself. I could say simply disregarding the evidence supporting moiety division is, I think, premature. I'm not saying that I am right, but there is evidence, especially also anthropological evidence, because no matter what, we are talking about small communities, and moieties happen in small communities when they need a collaboration with non-kinship groups that moieties can give. And in fact, my presentation gives circumstantial, encouraging evidence, especially supported by the Lebena tombs, but again, we need a settlement excavation to be sure about that. So, of course, people can disagree. Evidence is partial. Every tomb may be different, but once again, we cannot either disregard the evidence from Lebena. We are not talking about one tomb. We are talking about 3 different tombs with a coherent material culture, replicated basically almost the same in 3 different cemeteries. Of course, we are talking about very close communities, because I think that the 3 tombs are left 10 kilometers apart from each other, from Eurocambus to Zervo, something like that. So I won't deny they are close communities, but they are basically behaving the same.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, now I think we have come to an end of this night session. No other questions? Yes, of course, Piotr. Yes, you are welcome, Piotr.
Do you mind coming up the podium so the
So
online participants
can hear you?
Yes.
Okay.
Κλείσε το μικρόφωνο.
So you can pose your question here, and I will let me stop sharing.
But I don't have to write. I can just talk and they will.
Yeah.
Okay. I have one question to George, actually, about the use of the term urban, because you said, I know it was probably, coincidental and it doesn't mean a lot to you to use the term, but maybe you have a reflection on this. I'm asking because my own research focuses mostly on urbanization, and I wondered if you have any reflection on your own on when you're actually allowed to start using the term urban, and because you said like 2 or 3 times that the urban centers start, and then you differed between palatial centers and smaller, still urban sites. So I wondered if you have any reflection on the hierarchy and on what urban actually means for Minoan sites, like what terms have to be fulfilled for the site to be considered urban in Minoan context. I know it's not, out of the blue, but it's just my own research focuses on this. So I wondered if you have something to say that I can maybe, reflect to.
As you know, the term urban is a very complicated term, and no, it's okay. Referring to who is speaking, who is talking, in which field, in which culture, it's a very it's a complex it's a very complex term. So we could have a very big discussion about what is urban and what is not, what is urban in a grade. For me, for this presentation is when we have organized a network of streets, of houses, of public areas, of this kind of characteristics. We can talk about other applications of this term. We can talk about social perspectives or aspects that could be related with the term urban. For me, it's the presence of the building, the appearance of palaces is an urban characteristic. I mean, this is for this exact time and question, this is my answer. If we could talk for other things or in other ways, it would be maybe another answer. But the term urban is a very big discussion. In this case, I use it as for the appearance of the palaces and the other settlements.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I like the answer a lot because I mean, you will see tomorrow in my presentation, because for me on the mainland, the term is so closely linked to palatial that they are basically are the same, that only the palatial sites are actually what can be called urban on the mainland. But I know Crete is more complicated than this. But okay, maybe more tomorrow after I have a second question to Adonis. First of all, what happened to the brilliant reflection on Minoan court-centered buildings that I heard 2 years ago? There was nothing done. Yeah, but now it was all metallurgy. But so my question is, because maybe I misunderstood or missed something, so you can just clarify. But you said that the main source of copper for the Aegean are the surface finds of malachite in the 3rd and 2nd millennium BC. But then you also said that in the late Bronze Age we transferred to mass production based on imports from Cyprus and on Labdian mines. So when exactly this transfer happens? When does the malachite stop being so important?
Let me see where.
Hope we're good. Okay. Oh, sorry. There I am again for the 3rd time today. So, first of all, I said that during the early Bronze Age, all right, and until the end of the early Bronze Age, it was mostly surface deposits, but quite often used with sulfidic, underground and primary deposits used. So it's not just the malachite is not longer used. As far as I'm concerned, I think malachite occurs in underground deposits as well, but I'm not quite sure. Maybe just knows better about that. But it's not the differentiation. It's not about malachite or not malachite. It's about surface deposits and underground deposits. All right. So this. I'm not very sure that surface deposits are stopped being used, but after the early Minoan III period or the middle Bronze Age, the production turns more into underground deposits. If that answers the question somehow, from Lavrian and Chalds Mountains, they use the deposits used are mostly underground or primary, where the development of minerals are better. So it's not if that malachite is not used, it's what kind of deposits are more preferred.
But you would say that the surface deposits are used all the time, but they're never found.
Well, I'm not really sure if they're ever abandoned. I don't think they're ever abandoned. I think that the indications from mass production are coming from underground deposits. That's the thing. So because there is a difference in smelting as well. surface deposits are more oxidized. So they have more, how it's called, imperfect smelting. They leave more slug, just to put simply. This we can tell from the mounds of slugs found in cyclades and then Chrysogamina as well. This is limited later. And we know that the copper used is more clear, pure. So that's what I said at some point. It's not that the previous techniques are necessarily abandoned. It's just that the preference changes into the kind of deposits, not the minerals necessarily. I mean, they use copper, they use other minerals besides malachite. I think that malachite is more common in the Bronze Age. It's not that they're not using the other ones. And more will come for the cards, I promise, just in due time.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience? If you don't have any questions, maybe we should close for tonight. We'll be here tomorrow as well. So what follows is ice-breaking drinks, just opposite of we are here, yeah.
The online participants unfortunately cannot be with us.
Yeah.
But
for the drink,
maybe we can have a show in your name.
okay.
Thank you very much, and hopefully all the difficulties that we encountered were not too much of an inconvenience for everyone.
We hope so.
We hope so.